Welcome to Tales from SYL Ranch Live, where everyone is entitled to my opinion, and I'm Bill Stone. Well, tonight on Tales from SYL Ranch, we have a few topics I'm going to talk about for sure, but of course we'll take any other topics that you want to talk about. We, of course, have live call-ins via Skype, basically any time that you want. I might, change it around so it works in with what we're doing, but you can do any live calls that you want. We will have the weekly Lancaster County, Nebraska virus statistics. I'll have some commentary on the presidential debate. We'll talk about a little review of Star Trek Lower Decks Season 1, Episode 9, called Crisis Point. And we're also going to talk about how you may be being genetically manipulated. Really. Now, this is a live stream, so even if I'm not able to get to you via Skype, you can always talk to me in chat. I will always have people in chat. You can ask me any question that you like, whether it is political, social, economic, the various virus things that I can't talk about, without YouTube ranking my channel and my videos even more than it already does. You can talk to me about the United States Civil War II in progress, and even topics about science fiction, fantasy, superheroes, genre, and stuff like that. Now, I am happy to answer each and every question in as much detail and as truthfully as I can. And there will be some personal subjects that I don't want to talk about, but pretty much anything else is fair game. And I will get to as many viewers as I possibly can, with the understanding that I don't really want the stream to go much longer than 3 hours, because this old body's wearing thin. But beyond that, I also spent a bunch of time doing yard work today that was unpleasant. And it's kind of screwed up, half of my side here. It kind of inflamed my sciatic nerve. Just a real quick thing. Whoever is watching, it looks like I've got 3. If you could type something in chat just so that I know you're there. A week or so ago, I had my chat get kind of screwed up. I want to make sure that I can actually get that, or if I need to fix it. Now, if you'd like to call into the show, you can do it with Skype. Now, since I don't want to give out all of my Skype information in public, I'm going to do it this way. If you want to talk with me, you can send an email to callin@sylranch.tv. You can give me your Skype information, and then I'll Skype you back. Hey, guys, thanks for giving me stuff here. Cars for Critters, nice to see you here. Dalton, great. And approximately, is that a bolo that I'm wearing? Is it a wire? It's a bolo tie. It's the usual bolo tie that I tend to wear on this. But if you want to call me again, send me an email to callin@sylranch.tv, and I will Skype you back. And that email address again is callin@sylranch.tv. So, while I wait for some more people to come in, I will give you the answer to the question that nobody asked. What is the current statistics for the virus here in Lancaster County, Nebraska, where I live? I have this sourced in my description box. You can see it below. So it's a great tool that shows you all of the interesting information about the virus in Nebraska, the state as a whole, or Lancaster County, or any place else that you want to look at. So the statistics today, the population of Lancaster County remains relatively static at 319,090 people. We have more tests this week. We're up to 74,606, which is significantly up from next week. The total number of positive tests is 6,490, which makes a certain level of sense considering that we've got a lot more testing. Still, the total deaths in Lancaster County remains as 24, just like it has been for a while. Now, deaths as a percentage of total tested is 0.0322, which is down from last week. Deaths as a percentage of positive cases is 0.3698%, down from last week. And deaths as a percentage of the population is at 0.00752. So, that's the answer to the question that nobody asks. Now, regarding the presidential debate that we just had. My live stream was less than optimal because I was thinking I didn't dare put like C-SPAN's footage in a window or mix in the audio that came with it. But I've been looking at some other YouTubers. Next time that I do one of those, I will be including that stuff because I saw that Daisy Cousins had done it. And hell, if she can do it, then I should be able to get away with it as well. Now about the debate itself. You know, I did the thing. I pretty much said what I was going to say in terms of who won, which is it's a draw. But the reason it's a draw is because we've now come to a position in politics, in American politics, where like nobody can be civil to each other. You know, this is an unusual, it's not quite an unusual debate because President Trump did some of the same stuff with Hillary Clinton when he last ran. But this time around, I was just talking over everybody and generally being pretty rude. And I just look back at some other debates in my lifetime and geez, you know, there was a time when you just had a debate. You know, person would give his side, another person would get his side. Maybe you'd get some back and forth, you know. Even if you don't disagree with the other side. I mean, President Reagan has a very famous thing that he did, I believe, with the Reagan-Mondale debates, when he said, well, there you go again. When he was responding to Mondale saying we need to raise taxes or whatever the hell he was doing. And hi, Drop of Truth, glad to see you here. The part where I'm going to talk about being genetically manipulated, I don't remember if you gave me the links to it or not, but it sure scared the frack out of me. So I just look at this whole thing, and it's just like, God, you know, this is what American politics has come to. It's partly due to President Trump because he pushes back. No other president in American history has actually pushed back what the press has said about him. Usually they just ignore it, but he pushes back. And during the debate, the reason he started, really interrupting was the fact that, Biden was saying stuff or the moderator was saying stuff that just wasn't true. It just wasn't. Let's see. Drop Truth says the debate between Trump and Biden reminded me of the first debate between Trump and Clinton. Yes, just embarrassing. I wouldn't call it necessarily embarrassing. Just really uncivil. And unlike a lot of other debates that I've seen during my lifetime, hang on a second, I'm going to shut off my. Pretty much unlike any other debates, that I've seen mostly in my lifetime. Again, it's just usually people giving their opinions one way or the other, and maybe some back and forth, but not complete insanity, which is what went on that time. Johnny Arcade, nice to see you here. It's difficult to be civil with someone who blatantly lies and then is propped up by the moderator. I totally agree. I mean, I get what was going on there. If it was me and they're sitting there telling lies about me, of course, I'm probably going to get pissed off. I don't know personally how I would have handled it. I don't know for sure. But clearly, the takeaway that everybody gets from this is Trump failed to denounce racists and white supremacists and stuff like that. Actually, no, he did. He did. It was just lost in this constant battle back and forth between he and the moderator at that point. Chris Wallace. You get somebody from the press to do these things, right? And it scrolls past in my lower third every single time that I have a show. Nothing you see in the press is real. Nothing. And that is not an exaggeration. For 40 years, I have engaged in a very masochistic hobby of debunking the press. And it's now at a point where give me any news source, a story from any source, and I can prove in about 30 minutes one of three things. Either that the event being reported never happened, or the event being reported didn't happen as reported, or if you strip away all of the opinions, emotionally loaded language, and stuff like that, and non-factual stuff and filler, you wind up with maybe a couple of paragraphs at best of actual facts. If anybody wants to see me do this, it's been a while since I have, feel free. What I like to do is get suggestions from viewers. It kind of needs to be print because it's easier to put that up and show it. But if you want me to do it, if you want me to show my methods, which I'd be happy to do, choose any article that you want and just email it to, I don't know, callin at sylranch.tv, same one you do just for call-ins, but send it there. And I will sit there and debunk it right in front of you cold. I will not read the article at all in advance. I will simply sit down here and ad-lib it, showing how I, do these things. So when it comes to the debates, you get somebody from the press. Those guys, it doesn't matter whether they're from Fox News or anywhere else, they are not impartial in any way. You want to get somebody impartial, get me, because I'm a libertarian. And frankly, I couldn't care less about either of them. I will just come up with fair questions to ask people. I'm happy to say at this point that I am voting for President Trump, even though I am a libertarian. And that's because, also as scrolls past on every single one of my shows, the left has become the enemy of civilization itself. I cannot run the risk of a split vote getting Biden in. I don't like doing it. I prefer to vote my conscience and vote libertarian. I just can't do it this time. I just can't do it. It's too much of a risk. I have to throw my vote behind someone who is likely to win so that Biden does not get in. The left is the enemy of civilization itself. And for those of you who are new to my stream, thank you very much for being here. You'll see me from time to time drinking from that water. It helps keep me hydrated. I tend to get cotton mouth if I talk too long. Let's see what we got here in chat. Proxenoid says, Trump demonstrated that Biden's claim of knowing how to handle bullies was BS. Yeah. After watching the debate, who would you rather be president if your family were kidnapped? Yeah. I think it was a tie. But only because it was this constant bickering back and forth where they were talking over the top of each other. And, one of the things you learn if you do a show like mine and you get call-ins is that you can't let people talk over each other. If I get a caller, I will let them speak as long as they want and then talk myself. They put out an idea, and even if I agree or disagree, I will talk about it after they're done talking because it's totally confusing to the audience. They don't know what's going on anymore. It just looks like endless bickering, which it kind of was. Looking at my chat here, Drop Truth says, interrupting, bickering, and obfuscation is always the tactic of a weak debater. I don't know that that's necessarily true. As I say, I think Trump was reacting, getting angry that people were lying about him, which they were. And, it's a tactic. It was a tactic on his part to some extent. Biden, it gives me no joy to say it, but it's quite clear that Biden is suffering from some level of senile dementia. Now, I don't like saying that because I've got close family members who are, going through that sort of thing, and it's terrible. It doesn't get better; it only gets worse. The fact that he was able to sit there for 90 minutes and be more or less coherent surprises me. However, I will tell you something. One of the things that I like to watch for is certain level of body language. Now, I am not an expert at it. I can only pick up, a few tells here and there, to tell, okay, this person's probably not being completely truthful. But there is somebody who is an expert, and you can find it on Bombard's Body Language, Bombard. It's a woman who has done this for a living, for law enforcement. She does a really good job. Now, you can find a channel on YouTube called Body Language Backup or something like that, because she got kicked off of YouTube for saying bad things about Democrats, pointing out when they were being not necessarily truthful. Well, I watched it, she went through and did Biden. She thinks Biden was wearing a wire. Now, I don't know about that. If he was, it wasn't obvious. It wasn't anything you could see. But she thought he was wearing a wire. And I trust her body language, looking at it and interpreting it a hell of a lot more than I would certainly do mine. For mine, it just looked like occasionally he was looking down and maybe writing notes or something like that. For her, she could look and see, okay, this is where he's not listening to what's going on over here because he's got something going on in his ear, and it's hard to concentrate on both of them. Trust me, I know this. When people call in, there is a minor lag that goes on, so I can hear in my own ear what I'm saying on a slight lag, and so it's a little difficult to deal with. But it's possible. It's possible he was wearing a wire, and I certainly trust her. Let's see. Car for Kidders says, someone told me Joe Biden has a body double. They said you can tell by his ears. I don't think that's necessarily true. I guess I haven't looked that hard, but any place I've seen it, I think it's Biden. It's just, particularly when he's making, gaffes and stuff like that, which he does a lot. There's an ad that YouTube decided that I needed to see. I don't know why. But there's an ad that YouTube decided I should see that was a Biden ad, and he stumbled over the words in the first sentence of the ad. Now, that blows my mind, because with my pre-recorded videos, which I haven't had as much of as I'd like, I have family things going on that kind of preclude it. But when you're screwing up on a line, right, when I record things, I record them all in one take. And if I screw it up badly, if I start to stumble over my words, I just shut it off and I do another take. So for Biden to be screwing up a line means that was the best take they had. You go through, 20 takes? That's the best one they could come up with. So I don't know that there's a body double. I just know he's from, you watch his campaigning. It is totally different than any other of the campaigns that he's been involved in his last 47 years. So I don't know if there's a body double or not, but I certainly think he's suffering from senile dementia to some extent. Johnny Arcade says Trump denounced white supremacy to Wallace's face in 2016 on TV. They are pushing this simply to frame the riots in a different light. Yes, they absolutely are. Trump has done this repeatedly, where he has, said, he hates racists, he hates white supremacists, he just wants to see peace. He has said that over and over and over. And yet the press just ignores it and goes as if he's some kind of racist, which blows my mind. The guy has employed so many people over the course of his career. A lot of them must have been black. I know he's got black people in either his cabinet or, sub-cabinet level stuff. And they can call him a Nazi, but geez, his son-in-law is Jewish, and his daughter converted to Judaism so that she could marry him. If he's a Nazi, he wouldn't have let that happen, or he would disowned his daughter or something like that. That's ridiculous. That's utterly ridiculous. And anybody who says it doesn't know what they're talking about. They've been listening to the press, and nothing you see in the press is real. Nothing. You know what? One of my last ones that I did, one of the times that I debunked a weather report. A fracking weather report. When I pared it all down, it was only 2 or 3, paragraphs, and they got some stuff wrong. That's how bad it is. They can't even get a weather report right. Nothing you see in the press is real. Nothing. Drop of the Two says, curiouser and curiouser about the body double. Thought the same thing yourself. Again, I can't tell. It isn't something I've seen. Drop the Truth is talking to Johnny Arcade, says it's ridiculous since the Democrats created the KKK anyway. Blaming others for their own failure again, Joseph Goebbels would be proud. Yes, that's the amazing thing. I mean, Joseph Goebbels was Hitler's minister of propaganda. And the American free press have become propagandists. It's amazing. It's a free press. They can do anything they want. They can tell the truth if they want to. But no, I don't think they can get the facts right even when they're trying. If you've got a cat that the fire department got out of a tree 2 blocks away, I don't think they can get the facts right. They're just really bad at it, even if they're trying. Nothing you see in the press is real. Nothing. Drop 2 says, thanks for the body language link, Bill. Oh, absolutely. I don't know if I linked to it. If I did, I'll try to remember to put it in afterwards. I have a lot of links down there today. Drop 2 says, I thought Biden was looking at an iPad. I don't know. My impression, again, was he was just looking down because they can do notes, I think, like that. That's what happens in a civil debate. You get somebody who says something and you want to refute it, so you go, okay, I want to make sure I hit this, I want to make sure I hit that. But Bombard's body language thought he was not doing that. He was looking down because he was listening here in his ear, and it's just so hard to listen to 2 things at the same time that are going on. Let's see, Johnny Arcade. Yeah, there's no winning against people who can't even be honest with themselves about what they are. Yeah, absolutely. Drop 2 says the battlefront has been set. I expect Trump to go for the throat in the next debate. Yes, there is a lot of ammunition. Absolutely, lots and lots of ammunition. Drop 2000 says Chris Wallace certainly helped Biden when the subject of Hunter Biden's criminal activities in the Ukraine was raised. This is still an ongoing investigation. Yes, you're absolutely right. I wish I could. I'm subscribed to it, but I can't find it. There is an entire thing going on in Ukraine where they're investigating corruption in general, but also both Hunter and Joe Biden are implicated. They are major suspects. I'm amazed that nobody ever brings that up. I mean, if I was Trump, I'd bring that up. I wouldn't go after Hunter. I'd just say, hey, you're a suspect in an ongoing corruption investigation in Ukraine. I don't know why he didn't bring it up. He should. President Trump, if you ever happen to see this, which is unlikely given my viewership, but if you ever happen to see this, please bring that up, because it's a perfectly valid, useful thing to say. Let's see. Johnny Arcade says, never forget how much the people who now hate Trump loved the show The Apprentice. Yeah, they only hated Trump after the press started telling them that they should. You know how bad the press is, right? Don't know if you were here, Johnny Arcade, to see it. But where I live, this Lancaster County virus statistics, just look at those infinitesimal numbers. That's infinitesimal. It's a non-issue here, and it never has been an issue. And yet the press has succeeded in terrifying everyone. And the funny part is, Dr. Fauci came out and actually said that the flu, the death percentage on that is 0.1%. And they're not worried about the flu. The press has simply got this, oh good, we can scare everybody. We can say it was all Trump's fault. Here is a absolute reality of life. Government cannot save you from a virus. That's an absolute truth. There is no way that government can save you from a virus. The best thing you can do is close down borders. If it had been me and I knew how crazy the press was going to be, I might have shut down all international airports. No traffic in from anywhere in the world. And I also would have quarantined all states either bordering Canada or Mexico or on the east or west coast. Because that's where the worst part is. And that's where all of this, the traffic comes in and out from international trade. I don't know that you could have gotten away with it, but that would be the only way that you could do it. Just cut all international trade, no one coming in at all, ever. But government can't save you from a virus. That's ridiculous. And in any case, it's really, except for, for new viewers, I'll explain it to you. You have to look at infection vectors, right? What an infection vector means is what direction could you come in and get infected? Well, New York City has 2 international airports in the immediate area. They have tons and tons of international trade via all kinds of, seaboard stuff. They have the highest population density in the United States. Well, of course it's going to be a problem for them. Anytime we have something like this, it's going to hit New York City bad. Come out to the center of the country where I live. Well, my state is landlocked. We do not have any international airports. The nearest one is O'Hare International in Chicago, which is about 6 hours away. Sure, you can, connect through via Lincoln or Omaha, but we don't have our own. We don't have any tourism to speak of. There's nothing to see in Nebraska. People just get on I-80 and they drive straight through without, maybe stopping for gas, or if it's late, stay in a motel. They're not going to be here for any level of tourism. We just don't have the infection vectors. We don't have any international trade. We don't have international people coming in. We don't even have people from the East or West Coast coming in here very much because they kind of don't like us. They look down on us. They think we're all, hicks and rubes and farmers. And to be perfectly honest, I like to tell people some of the theatrics that I do, what you're seeing here is a costume. No one that I know wears something like this. I'm wearing a pair of sweatpants under this, and when the stream's over, I'm going to go on and put on a t-shirt just like I wore all day today, moving around all this stuff in the backyard and taking it to the town dump. So you have to look at the infection vectors. You can't just say, okay, all of the United States has all these problems. You have to look at, the state level, and in some cases, even like the county or voting precinct level, before you see what the actual issue is. And what you see is the coasts are bad, especially New York City. But nothing that anyone can do is ever going to help New York City. Anytime you get something like this going through, it's going to be bad in New York City. That doesn't mean it's bad everywhere. Non-issue in Nebraska, but it's going to be problematic in New York City. It always will be. Let's see. Drop Truth says, Chris Wallace certainly helped Biden. When the subject of Hunter Biden's criminal activities in the Ukraine was raised, yes, there's ongoing, yes, yeah, you said that. I said that before. Johnny Arcade says, no, I'm sorry, I did that too. Drop of Truth says, was Biden ever involved with the Ukrainian One scandal with Hillary and Obama? I don't know. I don't know the answer to that. All I know is that I watch these lengthy videos that are made by the people who are actually doing the investigation. And they are lengthy. They'll talk about what their current progress is. And Joe Biden and Hunter Biden's name come up all the time. Let's see. Johnny Arcade says it's absolutely frightening that half of the country can't see through the media's scare tactics. Well, most people don't have my experience of spending 40 years debunking these schmucks. They don't really have the time to do the research necessary to not be paying attention to them. So they tend to believe whatever the press says. Unfortunately, nothing you see in the press is real. Nothing. Drop Two says, as I said on Twitter, I heard the most insulting thing I've ever probably heard this week on ABC TV in Australia. Drop of Truth, by the way, is one of my viewers from Australia. Glad to have you here as always from down under. And the insult was, the lockdown has eased. You are now allowed to. Yes, I saw that. Yeah. Allowed to in a democracy. Yeah. Some of this lockdown stuff has been declared unconstitutional by various sources, by various courts. It is unconstitutional. There is no language in the Constitution that authorizes the federal government to be involved in this in any way. You're hearing my perspective as a libertarian, somebody who wants a limited government, preferably limited to just the powers that are enumerated in the Constitution. And since there is no language, well, by the 10th Amendment, it is left to the states or the people. It's not a federal matter, and it never should have been. Dalton says, South Dakota has quite a few tourist attractions, and they got almost no deaths, and they never locked down. That's absolutely right. South Dakota has an enormous amount of tourism. It was down this year. I happen to be, I have some family ranch land that's a ways away from Wall, South Dakota. I don't know if you ever heard of Wall, South Dakota. Wall is just a tourist trap. But they see a lot of people going through there from many countries. They have a lot of people that work there from many countries. They never had a lockdown. I don't know how many thousands of tourists go to visit the Black Hills, which is, where Mount Rushmore is, Crazy Horse National Monument, and frankly, the entirety of the Black Hills tourist trap, because much of it is. But I love it very much. I've been there a million times. I'll go there anytime I get the opportunity. They also have the Sturgis Motorcycle Rally in Sturgis, South Dakota. 100,000 bikers come there every single year, and you know how many of them got COVID? None. And trust me, they were not wearing masks. The funniest thing I ever heard somebody say was an aunt of mine. I'll just say it. I don't usually swear, but I'll tell you what she said. She was talking to people about going to the rally because it happened to be there when we were around at that time, doing a vacation. And she said, "Well, if you like tits, you're gonna love Sturgis because it's like Mardi Gras. You hang around long enough, women will show it to you." None of those guys had any problem. That's how non-issue it is. 100,000 bikers all in one place for a week. No problems. A Drop of Truth says, remember your tax dollars. Pay the salaries of those political cretins, and yet we have no say in how much the money is spent. Absolutely. There is no say whatsoever. You can try to have some impact on with your congressman or your senator. Fat chance of that happening. I'll give you a perfect example. As my regular viewers know, I was in IT for 40 years before I retired. When the Equifax thing broke, I looked at what they'd done, and it was incredibly incompetent. And the Senate hearings that they were having were a joke because nobody knew the right questions to ask. It was a technical problem, and they were trying to figure it out in terms of a legal problem because all of those idiots in Washington are lawyers. So I wrote up a professionally done paper, which I've done a million times before. And I actually got a couple of the senator's cronies. It was Senator Joni Ernst at that time. I was in Iowa. And she got a couple of cronies to talk to me. I said, what you need to take away from this is, you can read the whole thing, but take away from this, what you need to take away is this. You need to have senators and congressmen, when they're doing things about tech, you need to have them with an earpiece in their ear. And you get somebody like me, or me, I'm happy to do it, and you have them fill out some pre-made questions, some initial questions to ask, technical questions. And then you feed them more technical questions. Because when you ask one, it's going to lead to more technical questions, and eventually you're going to get to the truth. Well, they said, thanks a lot, and that was the last I heard of it. And, I knew they screwed that up. I knew they screwed up that whole investigation. It was just stupid. And they do the same thing when they, talk to big tech. They don't know the right questions to ask. Not even the most computer literate of them don't know the right questions to ask. I watch those and I go, no, you got to ask them this, you got to ask them that. And they never do. Johnny Arcade. It's been a non-issue for me in Arizona, but I'm self-employed. Don't go out much. Everybody else is wearing masks. It's so goofy. The curve is flat. Nobody remembers this because nobody seems to have more than about a 2-month political memory. But the reason that we were supposed to wear these stupid things was because it was supposed to flatten the curve. It wasn't supposed to necessarily stop the virus. It was just going to flatten the curve, and we'd only be wearing it for a few weeks or so. Well, what a shock. Once you give someone in government any level of power, they will, if you give them an inch, they'll take a mile, or 100 miles, or 1,000 miles. I'm fond of saying, because it's true, people in Washington, D.C., your representatives, your senators, everybody, are power-mad, sociopathic narcissists in the textbook sense of the word. I invite you to look up antisocial personality disorder, which is sociopath, and I invite you to look up narcissistic personality disorder. Now, if you go down a bit, you will find a list of symptoms, and if you look at it, a lot of them apply on both sides, narcissistic and sociopathic. You have to call these people what psychologists call high functioning. Poorly functioning people who are sociopaths and narcissists cannot get along in society. They're too weird. Everybody looks and goes, that's weird. But these guys are high functioning. They can function in society, but really all they want is power. In each and every one of them, there is an emperor of the galaxy screaming, "Unlimited power!" There's not a single one of them that wouldn't become a dictator given the chance. Let's see. Dalton says, I'm actually going there next week. Arizona. Okay. Thinking about moving there. I don't know anything about it. 2-year-old daughter that I want to grow up free. Yes. There are lots and lots of places you can go. I certainly wouldn't go on the West Coast. Oh, God. Interesting thing. In the last 24 hours, Scott Adams, who I pay attention to some extent, because he's trained in how to persuade people, persuasion. He got mad about Trump's answer regarding, saying disavowing racists and stuff like that. And he said he wasn't going to vote for him. About 6 hours later, he changed his mind back to Trump. And he said that the reason that he did it was it turns out that that's a way to make, bizarrely enough, make the Democratic Party hate you. You slide over to their side and they still hate you? I guess it's because he voted for Trump last time. I don't know. It's ridiculous. Okay, so that's really all I have to say about the debates. It's just talking over each other and screaming, and I never really wished that I would pine for the past. I look at people who say, oh, the good old days. And hey, whoever's good old days they were never that good. You look at the 80s, when I was becoming an adult, and, everybody hated Reagan. The press hated his guts. But it was still relatively peaceful. I mean, we had marches. I was young, stupid. I was in theater at the time. And, the arts are filled with nothing but real small c communists, and I was one. And we went on a march, at least one that I remember. And you know what we did? We called the cops, told them we wanted to have a march, got a permit, and they closed off all the roads. Was there any property damage? Was there any arson? No, there wasn't. We just walked down the road, middle of the street, screaming stupid things like Ronnie Reagan, he's no good, sent him back to Hollywood. We didn't get into this insanity that we have now, and that's why I'm calling it, we're in the beginnings of what historians, I think, will call U.S. Civil War II. Drop 2 says the Daniel Andrews leftist Labour government curfew in Melbourne has been lifted. Well, that's good. It was declared unconstitutional by the High Court, your Supreme Court, and they were not reprimanded in any way. Well, they should have been reprimanded. They should have been. But yeah, none of this stuff that they do is sane, is constitutional by any sane reading of that document. Drop 2 says, Dalton Bridger says, do it. Your daughter will thank you for it in the future. Yeah, absolutely. Looking back, Reaganomics worked rather well. It was very similar to what Trump inherited. It was a terrible economy. Not surprisingly, Democrats don't really know what the hell they're doing. They just want to tax and tax and tax. That's their answer for everything. And what had happened was during the Carter administration, the freaking economy had gone to hell. I mean, there were gas lines, which we don't see today, but there were lines to get gas. And it was really terrible. And Reagan brought that economy out. He really did. He also ended the Cold War. And nobody wants to talk about that, but my perspective on that is a little bit different. I think he ended the Cold War by doing what I knew could have been done at any time during the Cold War. See, during the Cold War, you may not know, but people in my part of the country feed about at least 2 billion people in the world. That is how productive our agriculture now is, thanks to modern science. Well, the Soviets were buying our food because they couldn't do it on their own. A communist government, socialist government cannot make their own food. They must get it from somewhere else, and so they were buying all our food. We could have ended the Cold War at any time simply by cutting them off. I don't know why in the, 70 years or so of the Soviet Union we didn't do that. But Reagan engaged in a spending war with the USSR. He sort of bet the farm that we would be able to spend like mad and outspend in terms of like things like military funding. We could still have an economy because we're largely free market, or we're more at that time, and the Soviets weren't. He said we can break them, and he did. All this stuff they say about Gorbachev, nonsense. It was Ronald Reagan who ended the Cold War. Period. And as I say, looking back, like you, Drop of Truth, if I had to do over, if I was a libertarian when I was 18, 19 years old, I probably would have been a Reagan supporter. My only real criticism of Reagan is that he really ran up the public debt. That spending war that he had really did run up the public debt. And unfortunately, he set something of a precedent. He did what all Republican presidents do now, which is they talk the talk, but they don't walk the walk. Oddly enough, if you look at it, under Democratic presidents, the public debt doesn't increase as much. Now, this time is a particular unusual thing because they're doing, again, unconstitutional things. And so the public debt has skyrocketed even more. It is at a point where we will never be able to pay it off. At some point, that's going to come back and bite us in the ass. But in any case, Reagan set a precedent, and Republican presidents did the same thing after him. They said, okay, we can spend like crazy, and our constituency isn't going to care, which unfortunately has turned out to be the truth. Drop 2 says, Biden seems too insistent on keeping the immense failure of Obamacare. Why? It must benefit the wealthy in some way. Just a sec, Dalton, because I'm going to talk about that too. They're hanging on to it because they want socialized medicine. Obamacare was never intended to be the end of it. It never is. They always change it afterwards. And what they were going to do was somehow change it to be something else, and it would, a few years down the line, become something else, and eventually everybody would be on socialized medicine. That's what they planned to do. Biden himself, there's a great... When Obama signed the Obamacare bill, Biden was overheard on the microphone at the time whispering into Obama's ear, this is a big fucking deal. They're attempting to take over an enormous part of the economy. And if you want to watch my video, The Problem with U.S. Medical Care is Government, I lay out in no uncertain terms why we have the current crisis. And it's because government has unconstitutionally become involved in medicine. 100 years ago, it wasn't. And medical care was cheap. You could pay out of pocket. Even in the 1940s and 50s, when my father and uncles and stuff were being born, my grandparents were dirt poor cattle ranchers, absolutely dirt poor, and yet they could pay out of pocket for my grandmother to have each and every one of her children, and she spent a month in the hospital every single time. That's how bad it's become. And if you go into that video, I won't talk about it too much here. My father was a psychologist with his own practice, And he often told me, because, I'm the IT guy, he often said, because he was a very early adopter of computers, he said the only thing that computers ever did for him was allow him to keep up with regulation. The government screwed it up. The moment they get out of it, and by the way, it's totally unconstitutional. There is no language in the Constitution that authorizes the federal government to be involved in medical care, insurance, drugs, or anything else. The moment that they get out of it, that's the moment that it gets cheap again. And if you watch that video, it's a little bit long. And that's because I put a half-hour episode of Dragnet from, I think, 1954 in there that hinged on how doctors operated at that time. And you can see it. You can see what's happened just since then, in the last, I guess 70 or so years. But the government's been screwing it up, legislating, regulating, screwing it up, and now we have this. If it wasn't for government unconstitutionally doing these things, we would not have this problem. But yeah, like I say, in terms of Obamacare, they just want power grab. Power mad sociopathic narcissists. What a surprise. Dalton says Reagan also ramped up the drug war. Yeah. That's another thing I don't approve of in his case. That's unconstitutional. There's no constitutional language that allows the federal government, to be involved in that in any way. If anybody's going to do that, by the 10th Amendment, it's left to the state or the people. And I'm one of those guys, as a libertarian. I think that you have the right, as long as you're not hurting anyone else, to put any chemicals in your body that you want. If you want to die doing crack cocaine, that's fine. I mean, I don't like it if somebody in my family, was addicted. I was certainly, I'd want to get them help. But that doesn't mean the government tells them what to do. As long as you're not knocking people over to feed your fix, as long as you're not, getting high and then going out and driving, as long as you're not getting crazy and hurting somebody else, okay, don't care. I just don't care. It's none of my business. It's none of my business what you put in your body, and it's certainly none of the business of the federal government. So ramping up that drug war, bad idea. I'm glad to see that it's ramping down now. But as an example, and this is God's honest truth, 100 years ago, maybe a little more now, if you wanted some morphine, you could send your kid down to the local drugstore to get morphine without a prescription. Just a note saying, I want some morphine. Didn't really have any problems then. Sure, you had addicted people, but we have addicted people now. And once you decriminalize this stuff, you turn it into the same thing as happened after Prohibition was lifted. Instead of having, constant crime going on so that people could get what they wanted, it becomes a commodity. You'll get, stores with selling all kinds of liquor, and there's no violence involved in that. And when you get, prohibition on drugs, you get exactly the same thing that we had in the 1930s with, gangs and violence and all that, turf wars. Turn it all off. Just stop doing unconstitutional things. Let the states handle it. If they want to have drugs in their, if they want to regulate drugs and have violence in their cities, hey, okay. But it's not a federal thing at all, and it never should be. There's no language in the Constitution that authorizes the federal government to be involved in medicine in any way. By the way, you notice how I can easily roll off as a libertarian the phrase, there is no language in the Constitution that authorizes the federal government to be involved in blah, 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 so under the 10th Amendment, it falls to the states of the people. Let's see. Drop Truth says, a president setting a precedent. Nice pun. Wasn't intentional. I just spit it out. Hey, Star Cheese Player. It's nice to see you here tonight. Drop Truth saying, do the states who have decriminalized or legalized marijuana in the USA pay federal taxes for this crop? I don't know the answer. I don't know the answer to that. All I know is if they ever legalize it in South Dakota, I'm going to go out there, I'm going to grow one crop of marijuana, and then I'm going to go and put up a tent in Wall, South Dakota, the week before, the week of, and the week after the Sturgis rally. And I'm going to get filthy rich. One crop, goodbye. The only thing I'd have to worry about is the fact that there's a lot of Native Americans who would grow their own, and there's a lot of stupid people who would say, oh, Native American, it must be better. And if they're smart, and Native Americans often are, they'd say, okay, let's market this as something stupid for, the white man. Let's market it in a way that, give it a name, Dakota or Lakota Gold or something like that. That's the only real competition you'd have is the idiots who generally have some level of self-guilt, who will go and buy stuff from Indians. And, Native Americans, they're not doing that well in South Dakota right now. Legalized growing of marijuana would lift them out of poverty in a way that you would not believe. It's amazing. But, they'd possibly outsell me. But regardless, I'd still make a ton of money. Even if I had to pay taxes on it, I'd still make a crap ton of money. Super Cruise 63, nice to see you here. Two-way street on drugs. It's the taxpayer that have to pay for most of the medical bills, and most druggies do have to commit some sort of crime for their fix. Most of the time, you've seen it in person. Yeah, well, decriminalize it. I don't see many people going around and mugging people for drinking money. Alcoholics don't usually do that, because booze is pretty cheap, and there's no crime involved. You don't have to find somebody to get it. Now, if you are robbing people, knocking people over, well then, arrest you, go to jail. In terms of the medical bills, I just handled it this way. I'd make it part of insurance, as an insurance policy. Say, if, you're doing something illegal for drug use, your life insurance policy, your car insurance policy, whatever it is, can be then made null and void. It's just allowing the free market to sort of take over and say, okay, well, we can just say this is bad. We don't want to have to pay anybody on this. We don't want the public to pay on this, because I defy you to find any language in the Constitution that authorizes the federal government to be involved in those kind of payments. It ain't there. Under the 10th Amendment, it is the states of the people. Again, if it was somebody, that I knew, a family member, who was somehow addicted, I would certainly want to stop it. I'd certainly want to give them as much help as I could. Even if it's somebody I didn't know particularly, I'd certainly want to help them. But ultimately, what they stick in their bodies is their own business, as long as they don't hurt anybody else. And if they have problems, well, there are free things that you can do for that. Even now, there's free places that you can go, free clinics. But again, I just handle it by saying, hey, you do it, you invalidate some insurance policy you've got, and you get to die on your own. It's unfortunate, but it sends a message. It sends a clear message. You do this, you get to pay for it. And if you do that often enough, that actually is going to be a deterrent for some types of drugs, because people are going to look at that and say, hey, wait a minute, I have to pay. I'm going to have to do this, and you might get less people doing it. Superguru63 says, what pissed me off more is that they're shutting down vape shops. By the way, they helped me quit smoking, and promoting pot shops. Most of them vape health problems for the THC vapes. I can't really speak to that. I can mention that, I was once a pipe smoker. And it's the stuff that's helped me quit, firstly, started to be the vapes. Now I'm down to taking, been doing it a while because I can't seem to get off of it because of the nicotine addiction. But I'm down to taking nicotine pills, and certainly helped out my lungs a lot. And put me less at risk for, health problems later in life. Drop 2 says, where I live in semi-rural Australia, the crime rate has increased because the price of meth has more than tripled. Yeah, well, that's what you're going to get when it's illegal, when something is prohibited, just like we saw with alcohol in the 1930s. You're going to get crime, you're going to get drugs, you're going to get turf wars just like we have right now. How we did not learn from Prohibition astonishes me, to be perfectly honest. Supercrude63 says, I work as a mechanic here in the People's Republic of California, and 1 out of 5 cars smells like pot, have leaf litter, and a lot of times smoke in the car. Well, for somebody like that, jail. You know, from my perspective, you are allowed to do any damn thing that you want, as long as you don't hurt somebody else in the process. Or in the case of driving, obviously put people at risk. You know, that's where you draw the line for me. Are you hurting somebody else? If you're not, inject bleach into your bloodstream. I don't care. So, really, that's all I'm going to say about the debate. It was contentious. It was difficult for an audience member to follow. It was clearly Trump versus both Biden and Chris Wallace. They really need to get somebody else doing this stuff. By the way, tell me if I'm if my stream is lagging. My control panel down here for YouTube is lying to me to some extent. It often does. It's showing me spinning, but I can't reload the page. Let me pull up. Sorry about this. Happens sometimes when I'm doing this live. Let's see, I want to go to the studio. Sorry. I have to go to studio. I have to go to the current live stream. I have to get a shareable link, and then I can put it into my browser and see what I actually look like out in the world. And the page is loading. Oh, sorry. Go back. Okay, so it doesn't look like I'm actually lagging. It's just my YouTube, maybe lagging a little. I just dropped in my, okay. It looks like I'm going out there. If I'm not, let me know. Hey, Marshall, nice to see you here tonight. I can start now. Well, you pretty much missed the stuff that I'm going to talk about with respect to the, gosh, I'm lagging there just now. Hey, guys, let me know if I was lagging. I talked about the debate, and yeah, you know, aside from it being something of a tie, it was useless. It was just two guys screaming over each other, moderator screaming over them. It was hard for your average, viewer to follow. It didn't change anybody's minds. If you were going to vote for Trump before, you were going to vote for him now. If you're going to vote for Biden before, you're going to vote for him now. It doesn't, useless. Drop Truth is asking Marshall what he thought of the debate. Yeah, I know Marshall has some opinions about that. So again, I don't like to say pining for the old days, the good old days. They were never that good. But I do miss just having civil discourse, which just seems impossible now, just totally impossible. So, I do have a bit of Star Trek news. Let me drop this down just slightly. God, this looks like it's just... Yeah. Marshall's saying it was pretty much a draw in many ways. Yeah, I think it was a draw. Again, you're not getting anybody who is going to be... hang on a second. I'm getting an error. I may have to drop and reconnect. Depends. You guys tell me if you see me lagging. My YouTube control panel is telling me that it's all screwed up, but I can't tell from looking at it. So, but yeah, in terms of it being a draw for a shouting match, yeah, I think it was. It was a shouting match draw. Supercrude63 says, I ride a motorcycle, and the amount of pot smoking in cars today make it much more dangerous. People have a hard time spotting me, and a stoned person is way more apt to not see me. I agree. I mean, yeah, again, the cutoff line for me is, are you hurting anybody? Are you stupid enough to go out driving when you're high? And if so, hopefully, a cop will, go get them. I certainly, on occasion, I don't know if they've been smoking anything, but on occasion, I've certainly I've been on like I-80. I spent a lot of time on I-80 when I was driving because regular viewers probably know. I was living in South Dakota at one point, and my ex and my children were in Chicago, and I could not move to Chicago for reasons that had to do with my finances, which were all due to the divorce. But I couldn't move there, so I was driving back and forth, and I got to go I-29 in Iowa, I-80 in Iowa, and I-88 in Illinois really, really well. And on more than one occasion, when somebody was doing something stupid or looked like they might be drunk or something like that, I called 911. It's never a bad thing if you see something like that. Call 911, get their license plate, call 911. Getting some periodic buffering, you're saying? Yeah, okay. Tell you what I'm going to do. I can do this now with the way YouTube is doing this. I'm going to drop the stream just briefly and then reconnect. So, half a second. Let's see if we can make this stop. All right, it's now saying I'm excellent as opposed to having a error. So I hope I'm not giving too much of a break there. I never know for sure what it looks like when I drop and then reconnect. But at least YouTube does allow me to do it now. If you keep seeing that, let me know. Getting some periodic, you're doing, I've got my monitor down here at 1080p, and I was seeing some buffering as well. Superguru63 says, no, drop a tooth, I have to top an internet, and it's doing to me too. Okay, again, let me know if you're still seeing it. Having me disconnect and reconnect will often fix that problem. And fortunately, YouTube has made it easier. At one time, if you were going to do that, you risked the entire stream dying. But they've changed it. You have to actually end the stream in the control panel before it'll end. So, on to a couple of other things. Sort of the midpoint, I guess. It's 10 p.m. I'm going to talk a little bit about Star Trek Lower Decks Season 1, Episode 9, Crisis Point. I would give this a rating of about 3 out of 5, where my scale is 1 is existentially threatening, which means you can't watch it without maybe getting brain damage. And 5 is it made me laugh once. So 3 out of 5 isn't very good. So time check 23:02 mark. Yes, I'm running around at that. I can't check my time anymore. So getting into some of the details on this. I always like to talk about what worked whenever I do a any kind of review like this. I thought the idea of the holodeck program was interesting. I like to see what they do with the holodeck sometimes because they can do things with animation and they can do stuff now with CGI that they couldn't do when Star Trek: The Next Generation was in production. But you got a holodeck. That thing is capable of doing all kinds of stuff. So when they turned it, when Mariner turned it into a movie, and you got the credits coming out, which is small callback. Those were the same fonts that were used in Star Trek: The Next Generation. I own them. I use them from time to time myself. That was interesting. Bashing them on the head as they came through. That was interesting. Thought that was okay. The rest of it sucked. Seems better now. Thank you. A 62-second latency. Wow. Not sure what I got. Video's clear. Audio's better. Okay. I'm going to do what I have to do here. Can't help about the delay, unfortunately. But aside from the use of the holodeck, it just didn't work. The thing that really fell flat the most was Mariner fighting herself. Because her hologram program knows that in order to stay in Starfleet, she needs to straighten up and fly right. Other than being, frankly, an outright disruptive, negative influence over everyone who's near her. So, if the freaking holodeck version of her, which is drawn from her personal logs and everything else, knows that she needs to straighten up and fly right, And we heard Mariner say that if it wasn't for her mother, she wouldn't even be in Starfleet because she'd be kicked out on any other ship, which of course is true. You know, if it wasn't for nepotism, she wouldn't be there. Nepotism. Thank you so much. Nepotism. Uh-oh. I need to reload my page. Okay, it's still running. For some bizarre reason, it just shut off on my monitor down here for no reason. I hope you guys are still seeing me. If not, I'll have to disconnect and reconnect, although I'm seeing good health on the stream, so let me know if you're not seeing something. So thanks, Star Trek Lower Decks. Nepotism is now a thing in Star Trek. It used to be pure, you had to go do a good job to move up. Not anymore. Nepotism will get you there. Then there is the non-midi, because I never giggled even once in this. All that happened with, with the show was just as usual. It's not funny. I don't find it funny in any way. It disappeared for a second or two. YouTube is being weird with me tonight. That sometimes happens. Hopefully it won't get too weird. Disappeared, at least I'm back. Let me know if something happens again. Who's just booted me to the debate? Oh, you're back now. Okay, Supercruise 63. Just booted you to the debate. Okay, well, I'm sorry I booted you to the debate. Anyway, the non-midi. Always have to credit the brilliant Rich Evans of Red Letter Media. If you're not familiar with Red Letter Media, get familiar with it. They're awesome. The non-midi this time around was the character of Boimler. Just period. Non-midi. And Rich Evans of Red Letter Media has defined non-midi as something that's, some jokes work, some fall flat, and then there's jokes that you hear that actually make you less happy when you hear them. So, non-midi, you're going like this, and then you're like this. And the entire character of Boimler was that all the way through. It just idiotic, and not surprisingly, his idiocy gets him a bad mark with his, when he's working with the captain. But I just found it idiotic. It's a YouTube problem, as Marshall says. It happens to me sometimes. There's just nothing I can do about it. Face was worth it. Lots of live streamers are having issues. Ain't surprised. When YouTube works, it's great. When it doesn't, it sucks. There were not a ton of callbacks. To this episode. In this episode, usually there's just rapid fire callbacks. This time, as always, rapid fire dialogue. Some of which is intended to be funny, some of which isn't, some of which works. No, none of it works. But you get non-midi. One of the things that did not work, it wasn't non-midi, but it was a callback, and that was the flyby of the Cerritos in the space dock. It was okay at first, kind of like that, and then it just went crazy. By the way, as an aside, I have to say that I like the music on this show. I like the soundtrack. I should look up who's writing it, because I like the music. Even when you're getting into something like opening titles, forget the titles. I like the music. I think they have a good hand on music. Marshall is saying Al Gore created the internet. Ha, ha, ha. Yeah, exactly. I'm sorry. Me? Marshall? We created the internet. Marshall says, damn near impossible to do with how they do live streams. Yeah, it's most of the time I'm lucky. Every once in a while I don't. But this flyby of the Cerritos, this was no doubt an intentional satire on the very long flyby of the Enterprise in Star Trek: The Motion Picture. But it fell flat because apparently they don't know why that flyby was in Star Trek: The Motion Picture in the first place. And I'll explain it to you. When Star Trek the Motion Picture came around in 1979, that was the first new Star Trek, other than Star Trek the Animated Series, that we had had in 10 years. And fans at that time considered the Enterprise a character. So part of the reason that they did that flyby was to show us how beautiful that model was, and show us that it really is the Enterprise, and can we, live with that as a, new character, slight replacement. And it gave all of us watching it, we all loved it at the time. But if you're going to do a satire on it, it kind of falls flat for me. Drop True says, I loved Star Trek the Motion Picture, my favorite Star Trek film, very cerebral. It's not my favorite. Star Trek II, The Wrath of Khan is my favorite. But Star Trek the Motion Picture is good. I recommend to people, sometimes to reviewers, or reactors rather, watch Star Trek 2. You don't have to watch all of the movies to get it. It's not like, a series or anything like that. Star Trek 2 does lead directly into 3, which leads into 4. That's kind of a trilogy. But you can certainly watch Star Trek 2, The Wrath of Khan. Great movie. And then if you watch Star Trek the Motion Picture, you get to see a really radically different take on Star Trek. They're still valid. They're still valid takes on Star Trek. It's just that they're both radically different, and that's not a bad thing. Marshall says, okay, if you want to do that, you have to somehow sync the chat up after the fact, compressing X seconds of it into one frame of video. Well, there's much I can do. Reboot seems to clear it. Yeah, I just disconnected and reconnected. Yep, Super Cruise 63, the Enterprise was a character. In fact, my favorite. It's why when the Enterprise was destroyed in Star Trek 3, it was a complete shock. Nowadays they blow up ships with just, a reckless abandon. But at that time, in Star Trek 3, when they blew up the Enterprise, that was shocking. I will never forget. I was standing in line to see that film right next to a rather attractive girl my age that I did not know. But she ended up sitting next to me. I mean, I'm hopeful, maybe I'll get to know her. But she sat next to me in the showing. And when the Enterprise was being destroyed, she reached over and clutched my hand hard. There were people who cried about that. That was a big deal. That was like losing a character, a big one. All right, so I'll finish up the review here. At the end of any review, we have to ask ourselves, is it any good? Well, it didn't irritate me. A lot of the times this show just irritates me. I still didn't laugh. If you're going to make a comedy, you have to laugh. It never makes me laugh. It never even gets a chuckle. So again, rating a 3 out of 5, with the scale being 1 as existentially, threateningly bad, and 5 being it made me laugh once. So 3 out of 5 ain't saying much. Now, I do want to talk about something that's kind of a bigger picture with respect to Star Trek. I've noticed a pattern here. We get... it's like the Universal horror movies, right? If you watch the first ones of those that were produced in the 1930s, Frankenstein, Dracula, the Wolfman, things like that. Very good standalone movies. The Invisible Man. Very good standalone movies, something that every science fiction fan should watch, whether you like to watch old black and white movies or not. You should watch it. Those are great films. Some of their sequels were okay. Some of them just sucked. I've seen virtually all of them. Some of them were okay. Some of them sucked. And then when they started to get past, you get into the 1950s or so, 40s and 50s, then you started seeing crossovers. They were starting to get desperate. They'd say, okay, we're no longer pulling in the audience for just Frankenstein. Let's have Frankenstein meets Dracula, or Frankenstein meets the Wolfman. And you get these crossover stuff that's going on. We haven't quite got that with Star Trek yet. But what we do see is the third stage of when things are going to hell. The third stage of when things are going to hell is when you're no longer bringing in anybody with even your crossovers and team ups and stuff like that. You're no longer getting any money from that. and you must start making comedies out of it. Abbott and Costello meet Frankenstein, for example. Abbott and Costello were a very well-known comedy duo in the 40s, 30s, 40s, 50s. And they made a movie where, it was just all comedic. So I look at this and I go, I wonder if the reason we're getting comedy in Star Trek now is because they're running out of ideas. They don't know what to do. I have the sneaking suspicion, and the ratings on CBS, oh my God. They started airing Star Trek Discovery on CBS, and the ratings are abysmal. I assume that that's probably true on their streaming service too. So they're kind of just throwing things out there to see what sticks, and nothing has so far. Marshall says, the Formula series, lazy writing. Yeah, it's all lazy writing. I'm amazed that you can even call 10 episodes a season. I mean, I know they do it with, Doctor Who. But they do it a little differently with Doctor Who. But 10 episodes as a season? I'm used to like 24, You can't come up with 24 episodes, can you? Is it that expensive? Then don't make it. Just don't make it. Dropping 2 says, there'll never be a Mel Brooks Young Frankenstein for a classic horror movie. Oh, well, yeah. I mean, you get into ones that are just, outright intentionally, satirical and stuff like that. I don't even have a problem with that. Oh, there's so many things that Mel Brooks made that you can't do now. Blazing Saddles. One of my reactors that I watch reacted to Blazing Saddles. And she introed it with, I am really scared. I'm really scared it's going to be horribly racist and stuff like that. And then watched it and went, this isn't racist. This is making fun of the whole thing. It's taking a serious issue and just making fun of it, which it does. So, Dropper 2 says, you said that about the Mel Brooks thing. So, that's really all I've got to say about Star Trek Lower Decks. Doesn't make me laugh. It's generally kind of stupid. Occasionally they'll have something that maybe works. It is otherwise just rapid-fire dialogue, one on top of each other. And in this particular episode, you scratch your head and you go, hey, wait a minute. This holodeck program knows that she needs to straighten up and fly right. And it's only, nepotism that's keeping her on the ship. Straighten up and fly right. That's my advice. Drop It True says, Blazing Saddles. The bean meal fart scene was banned in Australia. I have seen ones when, maybe 10 or so years ago when they were still airing it on broadcast TV from time to time, cable shows and stuff like that. They don't cut that scene, but they kill the audio. So all you have is all of these guys getting up and moving and stuff like that, and you're just like, why are they doing that? If you know the movie as I do, you go, why people can't fart? So, but they use the N-word from time to time, but it's always something that's intended to be satirical. The very beginning when they say, okay, they talk about sending some horses down to the end of the track or something like that, and the guy says, hell no, we're not going to risk horses, they're expensive. Send a couple of N-words, And then they get there and they're on the hand cart and they go into the quicksand and they decide, oh, okay, finally these guys are going to come pull this out. No, they pull out the hand cart and say, damn, we nearly lost a $400 hand cart, not caring in the slightest about the guys that are sitting there sinking in the quicksand, the two black guys. That's satire. And it's funny because it's satire. It takes what is a serious issue and, blows it all out of proportion so that it's funny, but at the same time, you're getting this is stupid. This is not how people should behave, Super Cruise 63 says you saw Blazing Saddles in the movie theater. I had to have my mom there for okay it. Yeah, I never saw it in a theater, but I've seen it a million times after the fact. Drop Truth is saying, what amuses me is that when my folks were children, the word fart was considered uncouth. So they said word Trump, abbreviation of Trump for fart. Oh, that's interesting. Well, today, of course, there's no limits on what anybody can say in terms of language. So that's my review. 3 out of 5. Didn't make me laugh. Wasn't as horrible. Didn't irritate me the way that a lot of those episodes do. But it still wasn't good. So, the next one I want to talk about may come off sounding, this is more or less political, it may come off sounding something like a bit of a conspiracy theory, but it's not. I'm going to talk about something that I came across. I don't know if it was You Drop a Truth that mentioned it or if I picked it up somewhere else, but once I got into it, I was utterly shocked. And I have the documentation for it in my description box, by the way. There is a thing in the human brain called vesicular, monoamine transporter 2, which is fortunately VMAT2. VMAT2 appears to be some level of chemical or something that alters the way your brain operates. Now, there is a 2005 Pentagon briefing on this. It's called, maybe a little erroneously on YouTube, called Removing the God Gene. I have a link to that in my description box below. This thing, it's a Pentagon briefing from 2005. This is a real thing. This is actually a real thing. And it is frightening as hell. What it does is they found a part of the brain that seems to be active, more active, in people that are particularly religious. They call it fundamentalists. When they talk about it in the video that's the briefing for the Pentagon, it was Iraq War, so they're talking about how can we deliver something in there that's going to suppress this, let me check it again, make sure I get it right, VMAT2. How can we suppress that? Because it appears that VMAT2 has something to do with the way that people view religion and faith. So what they'd done with testing, and they talk about it in that video, was that they had successfully repressed the part of the mind that deals with religious faith. Now, their thought was, and apparently they did it, they were going to deliver it to war zones, to pacify the population. Not a conspiracy theory. This actually happened, and there's more data on it. If you look, there's first the 2005 Pentagon briefing. It's not long. I have a link to it in my description box. Then there is some other stuff. Let me look here. There's what they talk about spreading is called FunVax, fundamentalist vaccine, FunVax. There's a link to a couple of papers about this in my description box below. One of them's from 2007, I think. But what worries me is simply this. They talk in that Pentagon briefing about delivering this via like a virus. They talk about using a viral infection as a means of delivering this FunVax virus to the United States enemies. Well, if they were doing that in 2005, what are they now doing 15 years later? I mean, do you think they just sat on their hands the whole time? Let me check here. Yeah, Drop a Truth, that was you. Thank you very much. Pretty spooky. Actually, the video has been disproved by some and supported by others. I do know the principle is accurate and has been experimentally proven. Watch the film Altered States. Altered States is science fiction, but there is a lot of information on this. I also have a link in my description box to the Wikipedia entry on this. I don't know for sure, whether it's a Pentagon briefing. There's people who say it is, and reading up on it in terms of the science, it seems to be relatively solid. It was 15 years ago. Now, you have to ask yourself, is it at least possible that they would use it on Americans with the effect of generating reducing the interest in spirituality in general. Now, I always like to say I'm an atheist, but I'm not a jerk atheist like Richard Dawkins. I can't stand the man. The sooner he is pushing up daisies, the better it is for all of us who are atheists, because he's giving us a bad name. Point of fact, as an example of just how much I'm not somebody with a chip on their shoulder. When I was living in Des Moines, some out-of-state busybodies got their panties in a bunch when they discovered that some relatively small town in Iowa was using their town square for putting up Christmas decorations and stuff like that, and decided they wanted to stop it. Well, local talk show host that took me any time that I wanted to go on, because I was Bill the Crazy Libertarian, and they let me go on and talk to them, and I said, you guys are giving us a bad name. What the hell business of it is yours in the first place? You're out of state. Why are you doing this? And secondly, I don't care, and I don't know any other atheist that does. To me, a cross is a couple of sticks put together. But for a lot of people, that's a sacred, kind of icon. And I get that. I went to Mass with my ex for, 13 years, and I didn't believe it, but I learned a lot. But I don't care if some small town or even a larger town or a city has a place where they're, it's city property or something, and they're doing Christmas decorations. I don't care. It's not hurting me. And I said that to this, who is it hurting? And she said, well, some people might be offended. This is actually how the conversation went. Well, some people might be offended. And I said, I'm not offended, and I'm an atheist. Who is offended? And she said, well, some people might be. And I said, who? And there was no answer for that. Eventually just hung up. Eventually, was let go as a caller. But the host certainly agreed with me. It's not hurting anybody. It's not actually something that anybody sane would give a rat's ass about if we're atheists. It's fine. If it makes you happy, if it helps you get through the day, I am all for it. If believing in God and having spirituality in your life helps you get through the day and it isn't hurting anybody else, I'm fine with it. I don't care what it is, as long as it's not hurting somebody else. I don't have any problem with it. Got to run back some. Super Cruise 63 says the Enterprise will always kick ass, not the captains. Captains only order to push buttons. The Big E is the one doing the punching. She was the big stick from World War II through the 24th century. Yeah, love that. Drop Drew says it's a form of electronic DMT trip. Don't know that exactly. Excuse me. Dr. Truth is also saying Richard Dawkins hates God, but talks about him all the time. Yes, he's like obsessed. The sooner that man is pushing up the daisies, the better the rest of us all have it. He also supports panspermia. Watch the Ben Stein interview with Dawkins. It's great. I'll check it out. To be honest, I have a hard time sitting through the twerp. I really do. I have a hard time sitting through it because he'll sit there and he'll, insult people. People will say, oh, God talked to me and did this. And you say, well, then you're hallucinating. I'm like, you jackass. Somebody has religious faith, and if they believe God's talking to them, it helps them get through the day and they're not hurting anything. What business is of yours? Who cares? It's not hurting you, jackass. Super Cruise 63 says, I'm lucky enough to have seen CVN 65 in the space shuttle up close. Cool. Even saw the Enterprise shuttle fly over me on a 747 so low you could see the individual silico panels on the shuttle. That would have been cool. I'd have loved to have seen something like that. That would be awesome. Ben Stein's droning voice, Drop a Juice says, is almost hypnotic. He was great in Duckman. Yeah, I first saw him, I first became aware of him in Ferris Bueller's Day Off. Bueller. And I've heard him afterwards, and he's pretty monotone in general. Anyhow, back to this thing about VMAT 5. One has to ask oneself that 15 years after first being talked about, is it possible that they are using it on Americans with the effect of them having less interest in spirituality in general. You have to ask yourself that. It's been churches have been seeing their populations dwindle over time. That's pretty much been going on my whole life, but it certainly accelerated relatively lately. If you wanted to get rid of that, what would you do? Maybe that even in part accounts for the woke, who are now, of course, the primary instigators of Civil War II. It is very possible that because we have nothing but power-mad, sociopathic narcissists at the federal level, it's possible they've been using this on us. I'm not saying they have. I'm not saying they have at all. I'm saying it's possible. This is something that's been known for 15 years. It's possible. I don't like it, but it's possible. And, for that matter, this has been 15 years, and we have had a lot of mapping of the human genome. We know more about the brain than we did 15 years ago. What else could they be doing? What else might they have done? What can they do to pervert science in a way that it should never be perverted? You have to have ethics with science. If you don't, you'll destroy the world, literally. You must have ethics with science. And I say this as a scientist. And I know I'm a scientist because it says so on my college degree, and I spent 40 years in the scientific field. You have to have ethics. Any time when I was teaching, the last slide on the last night before we got into finals, I would throw up a slide that was just a meme, with Spider-Man, that says, with great power comes great responsibility. Because once you get to a certain level in IT, you have the ability to see a massive amount of data about the company you're working for, massive amount of data about individuals who work for that company, and you have to have the discipline to not look. You have to say, okay, this is private. This is not for me. This is private. I have to work on these systems and make sure they work and the data's off there someplace, but that's not for me. You have to have ethics. And if you don't, you can destroy the world. Science must have ethics. So one has to wonder if they've been doing that, if they've had, VMAT 2 worked out since 2005, 15 years later. What have they done? What have they done? God, you may very well be being manipulated without your knowledge. And one has to really look at, I think the whole COVID thing, the virus thing, the whole virus thing is, largely a panic driven by the press in order to make Trump look bad. But if they can deliver this stuff with a virus, gotta ask yourself. Again, I'm not saying they are, but we have nothing power-mad sociopathic narcissists in power. They would see this as a great way to get more power. Maybe the reason that the people who are, constantly destroying things and killing people and whatnot right now in Civil War II, what if they've been dosed with some of this and they have given up spirituality in favor of something like government? I don't know. But it worries the frack out of me. And frankly, there's probably no way to stop this. After all, you're certainly free to call your congressman or your senator, but I guarantee that absolutely nothing's going to come of it. Mentioned that thing I talked about where I went out and I tried to, get my congresswoman as a senator to pay attention to me. But you probably won't see anything out of it. But it is, at least theoretically, a complete means of control. And you can scream all you want, but I don't see it changing. I just don't see it changing. Even if senators and congressmen are aware of it, which they might not be. Maybe you have to be on some special committee to be even aware of the science. But by God, you have to have ethics. And if you don't, everything I need to know I learned from Star Trek or some level of science fiction. And there's a TV series called Firefly, which was freaking awesome, just awesome. It was a shame that it didn't go longer than, I think, 12 episodes, something like that. 12 or 13, I don't remember. But one of the biggest recurring sort of antagonists they have were called Reavers. And they were a result of that government doing this exact kind of thing. They were intending to create humans who were more docile. Turned out what happened was the humans just stopped doing anything and starved to death wherever they were. And the Reavers were really horrifying, and they had a different reaction and became something horrible. I never thought I'd see something like that in real life. But that may be what's going on. I don't know. It sure is scary as hell. Supercruise63 says, when I worked at Vandenberg Air Force Base, there was a building there that the floor levels were shaped to fit the shuttle perfectly. Wings, fuselage, cockpit, rolling the shuttle in perfect fit. It was cool. Oh, that's cool. Like a dry dock, kind of. Drop of Truth is saying, if you think contact tracing is a new thing, then go watch the original Outer Limits Season 1, Episode 7, Obit. So it was Obit or OBIT, originally aired November 4th, 1963. I haven't seen that one as a secret master of fandom. I'll certainly have to go and take a look at that. I don't have anything. I haven't. It's one of the few things that I haven't seen. So thank you for tipping me off on that one. I'll have to go look. But that's kind of what I have to say about that. The whole VMAT2 thing is now at least 15 years old. We have now learned quite a lot more about how the brain works. We have learned a lot more about the human genome. They're able to identify certain genes for certain things. They think they've identified genes that would make you more prone to be liberal, more prone to be conservative. I have a theory about that. One of the things I pride myself on as a host here is that I have a very wide life experience. I was born here in Lincoln, Nebraska, where I currently live. At the time that I grew up, the city was about 100,000. I spent summers, or at least pieces of them, from my age 5 until 15, on my grandparents' working cattle ranch, where I did that sort of thing. Piece of that land still in the family. I'm going to try to keep a piece of it in my family so that I have somewhere to live when I can no longer take care of myself. I basically have somewhere to go to die. But I got to see that side of things. And then I spent 10 years in Chicagoland, and then a number of years in Iowa, about 10 years in Iowa. And now I'm back here retired and looking after family members and stuff. But, excuse me, the breadth of experience I have and the fact that I've been involved in not one, not two, but 3 different professions gives me an insight that a lot of people don't have. And what I've found is that different professions tend to attract different people, different personality types. The arts, journalism, stuff like that, all attract extreme leftists. That's just what they happen to attract. It's not like you go there and become a leftist. It's you were a leftist in the first place and were interested in this so that you could, push your message. It was certainly true when I was an actor. I myself was a small C communist. I'm very glad I grew out of that. But I was at the time myself a small C communist. So was everybody else that I knew. There was nobody. I had a guy who was in high school on the debate team. That was a little weird because they had not just debates, but also things like dramatic interpretations, and that's the sort of thing I would do. When we went to go to various towns and cities and stuff for debate and things, he was the only conservative there, and he got a crap ton of flack from everybody else. I hope he's gone on to become an attorney. He said he was going to. That profession attracts extreme leftists. You get into cattle ranching, and you discover that it requires an enormous amount of self-reliance, more than most people in cities could possibly imagine. If you want something to get done out there, because to describe it, I have a video where I went out there. I forget the name. It's like Visit to Tales from SYL Ranch, Visit to SYL Ranch or something like that. And if you get out there to where the land that is still in my family is, you lose the paved road, and then you lose the gravel road, and then you're in ruts. And that's what it's like out there. That's how far it is. So if you need something done, you do it. If there's a fence that's down, you fix it. If there's a cow that's having some kind of problem, you get to be the vet. If there's one of my uncles did not wait to go to the hospital to get born. My grandfather delivered him. So you have to be a bit of an MD. You have to be an expert in certain types of science, because our agricultural productivity is incredibly high, just incredibly high. And so you have to be, expert in some various types of sciences. You have to be able to both drive, use, and maintain heavy equipment. Diesel-powered, very heavy equipment, because again, it's not like anybody's got a plow with a horse with a plow behind it. We have this giant, mechanical things to do the job for us. You have to have some awareness of trying to do, like out there, some level of irrigation. My grandfather spent years putting in irrigation to his various fields. Best example I can get, frankly, is when my grandfather passed away. My grandmother, too, I just didn't happen to be there for it because of the weather. But when my grandfather passed away, we went out to the family cemetery, which is way the hell out in the middle of nowhere, even more remote than what I just talked about. There's a plot for me out there someday. We went to the family cemetery. We had a second cousin or something like that. I don't know what his relationship to me is. But he brought out his backhoe. He dug the grave. And myself, two cousins, and my surviving uncles lowered that body into the ground. Lowered my grandfather into the ground. And then my cousin-ish thing, he covered it over. Used the backhoe to cover it over. You don't do it, it don't get done. And it's just as simple as that. You have to be extremely self-reliant. When you get into cities, then you get into specialization. You don't have to be totally self-reliant. In fact, it's impossible to be. You have this large web of people that you depend on for your life. It's not like I'm going to go out and deal with getting my own water, which we had to do. It was rainwater. We're going to have water run to the house. If there's some problem, we call a plumber. We don't work on it ourselves. If you're out there, you do the plumbing by yourself. If, something breaks, you call a plumber. If the water is out, you call the water company, etc. There's a big web of things. This leads to socialism in cities. I am unclear that individual liberty can survive large urban areas. I'm not sure. Certainly where I've lived, that turned into large urban areas, Chicagoland, for example, totally socialist, and now dragging the entire state down, bogging it down in terms of how bad their economics are. You want to know how bad it is in Illinois. They can't even pay their lottery winners. I mean, the single most easy way to make money, and they can't pay their lottery winners. They're so far in debt. So then, I'm in IT, and IT is a little different, in terms of the people it attracts. We tend to be a little introverted. If you caught me outside of this stream, I would be kind of introverted. We tend to prefer dealing with machines rather than people. Now, there's some people who can do that, and they ultimately usually go on to something like management, but most of us don't have the social skills to do it. When you talk about computer nerds, that's not entirely an inaccurate statement. It's kind of insulting to us. But the reality is, we kind of prefer working with machines rather than people. Everything I'm doing here, I do myself. I prefer working with the programs and stuff like that rather than necessarily, and I interact with my viewers, of course, and having engagement and stuff on social media. But ultimately, I'm a geek, and I kind of prefer working with equipment. So that's where my breadth comes in, is most people can't say that they've had that kind of experience. Real quick, back into my chat. Drop of Truth says, the Nazis were the first to realize that fluoride in the water makes the drinker more docile. Of course, the American OSS became the CIA, and when they included Gestapo and SS officers in Operation Paperclip. I'd have to look that up. I never know what to think about fluoride and stuff. Today, I'm not sure if there's fluoride in the water that we have. I know it would go through a processing plant. We're sitting on top of what's called the North Platte Aquifer, which is a gigantic, covers a couple of states or more, underground water source. It's where everybody taps into to get their water, for the most part. So I don't know for sure what the situation is on the fluoride like that. They used to give it to you just as a matter of course from, as you went to the dentist. Not so much now. SuperCruise63 says, the one thing I miss about working on the base is seeing the missile up close, maybe 100 meters or so. That would like to have seen how a Titan 3D compared with a Falcon 9 size-wise. Yeah, absolutely. And they both launched from SLC4 where you worked. That's interesting. On the way out, and if you look at my video about it, on the way out to my family's ranch land, you pass two old missile silos. They were covered with cement and filled in, but, it was interesting because they were always targets. Really stupid. You should never target, they should never have put the nukes out in agricultural area. Bad idea. Because every city of note was always a target. So they're going to die. Just going to die. If there was a World War III came, they were always going to die. If there were survivors, they would also have nuked out a whole bunch of this agricultural area, and whatever survivors were left were going to starve. Dumb idea. They should have put those. Silos right in the middle of Chicago, because it was a target anyway. Don't target off where you grow your food. Target off, if you have food, if you have arable land that you can grow food on, then you may be able to eventually recover as a society or civilization. But if you blow it all away, you're screwed. Those launching things should have been inside of cities. Let's see. Drop of Truth is saying, SuperCruise63, how many tons do those missiles weigh? 20 tons, 30 tons, or more? SuperCruise saying, I don't honestly remember. Not when a Titan 3D went off, you could see your windows flex on your house 10 miles away. Yeah, and a launch night would light up the sky to almost daylight. It's freaking awesome. Yeah, I'd love to see something like that. Drop Tooth is saying Nikola Tesla preferred books to people. I agree. Yeah, most people aren't worth the effort to get to know. This channel and its chat room attendees being a nice exception. Yes, I have a wonderful audience. Tell everybody about me. Share me on social media. You have no idea how bad I want to get to 1,000 subs. If I get to 1,000 subs, I'd be able to do live streaming from my phone. I can't currently do that. They changed the rules so that you have to have 1,000 subs to be able to do it. I used to be able to live stream all the time. I can't anymore. I have to get the video, bring it home, maybe process it, and then run it through. It's a pain in the ass. I don't necessarily think that most people aren't worth knowing. Me personally, if they were going to diagnose me today, they would probably say I was somewhere on the autistic spectrum. But that's nonsense. There is no real autistic spectrum. My father talked about this from time to time when autism was starting to be a overused diagnosis. That was his opinion. It was terribly overused. He said he only ever had one real autistic patient. And this was a minor individual, because I never want to be clear, my dad never talked very much at all about things like individual patients and what they're stuff like that. They never talked about it. My mother was also a psychologist, and so you did occasionally get talk around the dinner table, about this or that. But I found out much later that they would do things like obfuscate things by changing the gender of the person under discussion and things like that, and it was never specific. But he did tell me one time that he only ever had one real autistic patient, and that was some kid that would put her hand in a fire and hold it there and not take it out, because they'd sit there and their hand would burn. And he said that that person was untreatable, that when they started coming to him, they were exactly the same as when they left. That's real autism. When they talk about putting people on the autistic spectrum, my dad was firmly of the opinion that it was a severely overused diagnosis, and they should not be there. Now, if they were going to do it to me today, if I was born today, they'd probably say, oh, he's on the autistic spectrum. Well, I don't want to be on it. I'm not really. I'm just an introvert. That's all there is to it. I like playing with machines more than people. That's all there is to it. And for me, as somebody who's pretty introverted, I do not get a lot of the social dancing that goes on. I don't like going to bars and stuff. I can see what's happening in terms of, guys picking up girls or stuff like that, but I can't personally replicate it. I don't feel how those rules work. I can't really feel how the other person is doing. I don't get that insight the way, a lot of people do. But I'm not autistic, and as I say, I don't think there are that many autistic people out there. It really blew my mind one time when I was teaching. One of the buildings that I taught in was adjacent to a place that was an autism daycare center. They'd have a bunch of autistic kids that would come in the morning about 3 p.m. Their parents would pick them up. I cannot tell you the number of times I'm not sure there was anybody who was taking their kids in there that wasn't like this all the time. Taking the kid in, doing stuff with their phone. Taking the kid in, doing stuff with the phone. I'm like, maybe your kid's not autistic. Maybe it's you're a crappy parent and you're not paying any damned attention to them. Maybe that's the problem. But these idiots would also be bragging about it. They had bumper stickers. They had stickers that went in their windows. And I remember one that actually had a personalized license plate. I can't remember what it was, but I saw it the first time. I went, you're bragging that your kid has some kind of disorder. What the frack? Maybe it's just that you're a crappy parent because you're paying attention to your phone and not to your kid. When your kid's little, they need a lot of attention. They need to be held. They need to be hugged from time to time. They need to, if you're sitting there staring at your phone all the time, Jesus, you're just a crappy parent. I bet your kid's not autistic. They're just suffering from the fact that you suck. Let's see. Drop Truth is saying the Titan II was the largest ICBM ever employed by the U.S. Air Force, 103 feet tall and weighing a colossal 330,000 pounds. It had a range of up to 9,300 miles, 3,000 miles greater than the Titan I. Yeah, and they were very, very accurate. That was one of the things that the U.S. had going that the Soviets did not. They made more, they had bombs that were basically bigger yield because they're going to chuck the things over in the general direction of the target and make a big splash and kill a lot of people or whatever. But the ones that the U.S. had, our tracking systems were much, much better. Still are. Much, much better. We could do much more pinpoint accuracy with our missiles. Supercruise 63 is saying, to drop a truth, the Titan 3D was 613,000 kilograms, about 120 feet tall. Wow. Yeah, drop a truth. You're saying autism is Greta Thunberg's superpower. Bloody hell. I have a whole video on her. She's an abused child. She really is. Her parents, she suffers from depression and has for many years. She is certainly introverted, whether or not, introverted some, not introverted enough that she can't stand up in front of the United Nations and, make an emotional speech. But she was pushed by what amounts to stage parents. She was saying, okay, they were saying one of the parents is an actual actor, and they were, I think both of them may have been, but they were pushing her into this, and a good parent, when she's all depressed, would have sent her to a good therapist, somebody who can work through these issues. And instead of, fixating on climate change, something that isn't even very scientific, fixating on it and saying, this is why I'm depressed, a good therapist would have, no, I don't think it's this. I think you may have a more global problem than that. Maybe we can treat it a little bit with, medication. Maybe you need some behavioral therapy, something like that. That's what a good parent would do. What these idiots have done is drug her into the spotlight. I don't know if it's against her will or not. But the worst part about it is she is going to suffer essentially like a child actor does. She's going to age out. Right now, for a couple of years, she's going to be the talk of the town and everybody's going to love her and all that stuff. And then it's going to come to an abrupt halt. And what happens with child actors is they're the center of attention. They get anything they want. They're wonderful. Everybody loves them. And then they age out and everybody disappears. And what they discover is they didn't have any friends. They had hangers-on and yes men. She's in that position. Her parents put her there. Greta Thunberg is an abused child. Drop Truth says one good thing about CV19 is it had removed Greta Thunberg, Extinction Rebellion, and global warming, climate change from the newsfeed. Largely, but you get any place that gets, like they're blaming the wildfires and stuff in the West Coast on climate change. No, it has nothing to do with climate change. It has to do with the weather, but the weather hasn't changed significantly. Greta's dad is a famous Swedish actor, and her mother is a renowned Swedish opera singer. Yeah. And they're both terrible, awful, horrible parents who are abusing their child and setting her up for a big-ass disappointment when the yes men and hangers-on disappear. And it's not going to be long. What is she, 17 or so? She's got maybe a couple of years more left. And then, poof. Everybody's going to disappear, and she's going to discover that she never had any friends, that nobody really liked her that much. She was just a good prop, and she's going to be even worse screwed up than she was when she started. They should have been sending her to a therapist, not to the United Nations. Drop 2 says the Jerry Mathers syndrome, leave it to Beaver. Yeah, it gets kind of worse, actually. You can look at, all of those, most of the Disney child stars who don't transition into adult roles, which is most of them. They get used up by Hollywood and everybody says they're wonderful and great and everything's, what you say you get and, just absolutely spoiled. And then they just disappear when you age out. Danny Bonaducci from the Partridge Family is probably the best example of this that I can think of. There's a guy who was the center of everything for several years on that show, and then it went away, and so did everybody hanging around him. And he discovered he had no friends. He just had yes men and hangers-on. Dalton says you should watch John Stossel's latest video on the California fires. I sometimes catch them. Depends on what time I've got. Last couple of weeks has been very, very hectic. Just in terms of things that I had to do personally. I do try to catch him. John Stossel is great. I love John Stossel. He is a self-avowed libertarian. I like when, he gets into interviews with people. There's a guy. They should get John Stossel to be the moderator of the next 2 debates. There's a guy who I think could probably be actually, not siding with one side or the other. You come up with some good questions. Because if you put me in front of there, if they hired me, and you should, debate commission, hire me. If they hired me, what I would be saying is, instead of what are you going to do in terms of health care, my question would be, Vice President Biden, can you show me in the Constitution where the federal government is authorized to be involved in this in some way? And then same thing to you, President Trump. Can you show me anywhere in the Constitution where this is authorized? Those are the questions I'd ask. I wouldn't ask these dumb questions about what are you going to do about this, what are you going to do about that. I would turn it around and say, all of these issues that you're talking about have no constitutional basis. Can you show me why you're doing them and why I shouldn't consider you maybe something of a traitor, violating your oath of office and intentionally doing things that are unconstitutional? But yeah, John Stossel's great. I love John Stossel. Wish there was more of him around. I'm kind of amazed that he can even work in his field. He's the wrong personality type. He's not a crazed communist, Because make no mistake, with very few exceptions, the press are generally communist, and even the ones that aren't any better source of news. I really don't think that they can get the facts right, even when they're trying. I don't think they can do it. They're just too stupid. They can't get the facts right. They're not there to get the facts. That's not the point. What they're there to do is to sell advertising. And the more sensationalist you can make things, the more advertising you sell. The more crap things you say about Trump, the leftists are going to love, the more advertising you're going to sell, the more clicks you get. So, very, very few of them aren't, and even the ones that aren't entirely on the left, you really still can't trust them because they'll only give part of the story. I often say, what the press doesn't tell you would just about fill the Grand Canyon. Supercruise 63 says, the wildfires are because you cannot collect dead and down firewood like you used to be able to do, which help to keep fueling the fire down. Leaving dead wood, dry wood on the ground only fuels wildfires. Yeah, if you're going to live in an area that is a populated area, you have to do some forest maintenance, good forest maintenance. And every time they have a wildfire there, they say, we got to change this and do it differently. And they never change. It's just ridiculous. Drop a tooth ass, curious and off topic. Britney Spears' sister is trying to get power of attorney over her assets now. What a world. Oh, God. Yeah, and that's a whole other thing when it comes to child actors. What their parents do to them. Oh, my God. It's just terrifying. Their parents, like Lindsay Lohan's, I think. She had to sue to get her assets. I'm not stunned about, forgotten Britney Spears' sister. She was a child star until she got pregnant at like 16 or something. Jamie Lynn Spears, that's who it is. Their parents are not going to take any, are not going to be getting any awards for good parenting. Jeez. Supercruise 3 says, and since my brother lived in the former city of Paradise, California, yeah, I remember you, lost everything that he owned in the fire. I at the time, I was trying to find a good charity. By the way, Supercruise 63, since you're out there, if you know any good charities, and the ones that I look for are the ones that are going to take as little money as possible for themselves and disperse it to the to people who are actually in need, most of it. I'd be curious to hear. I haven't looked hard enough yet to find one to promote, but I want to, even with my slow reach. I think it needs to be promoted. And you know that from firsthand experience. Yeah, I know. Yeah. Yeah, it's a terrible situation, and as I say, if you know of any good of a good charity, drop it in my comments or something so that I can go look at it, because I'd like to be, pushing some charity or the other to the viewers that I have, the same as I did last time. Hang on a second, I want to check something. Oh, you. Silly control panel. It doesn't work worth a crap. Sorry. Every once in a while, I have to look down at my control panel for the YouTube channel that they give me, and it generally lies. Drop of Truth says, I expect terrible bushfires again in Australia this summer. Could be. I don't know how your weather necessarily goes down there. I know you guys have really horrible bushfires out there. If stuff like that comes up, again, give me a good charity to push, because I would very much like to push it. I know I don't have a big reach, but what the hell? Regular viewers know. I told the story many times before. I just, besides being a nice guy, I am under something that we call the obligation. And this is because when I was a young man, I was hitchhiking, and there was a tornado warning. And at that time, it meant one had been sighted on the ground. And that put me in a very bad place, because I was hitchhiking, and the best thing you can do if you're doing that is to dive into a ditch or something that was close to you. So it was reasonably dangerous. Could have conceivably died under the right circumstances. But a guy, he stopped. He picked me up. He took me all the way to the gates of the boys' camp where I was working at the time, which was very well out of his way. And he just said he's under the obligation that for help he'd once received, he must in return help 10 others. Each of whom will then help 10 others, so that good deeds would spread out like ripples from a pebble in a pond. And while that's actually something that occurred in an episode of the TV series Kung Fu, that actually happened to me. And I have taken that to heart ever since. I don't actually know how many people I've helped, but I try to help out when I can. And I give them the same speech. I tell them for help I once received, I have to in turn help 10 others. And now I pass the obligation on to you. Drop of Truth. Oh, you're still talking about the stuff with the bushfires. So. Those are the big things that I had to talk about tonight. The one with the VAT2 just really, really kind of scares me, because it doesn't appear to be some kind of conspiracy theory. This appears to be something that was actually worked on. And we now know a lot more about the brain than we did. It's just damn frightening. If it's accurate, it's frightening. I don't know how to evaluate the accuracy of it necessarily, but when you look at the Wikipedia page on it, it talks about stuff like this. So, SuperCruise63 says, believe it or not, FEMA helped them a lot. Oh, okay. Took a couple of months, but helped them a lot. A lot of the nearby Goodwills and secondhand stores gave a lot of help as well. Okay, cool. Glad to hear that. And Drop It Through says, is that where the play it forward methodology came from? Not sure what you're talking about. I slipped off topic probably, and you may have to remind me. So, just in terms of what I have, prepared to talk about, that's pretty much it. I just really can't get over those debates. I just can't get over the debates. I'm just apparently too old. Not to say that the good old days were better, because they never are. People always want to remember the best things about what happened to them when they were younger. Nothing is ever great. Nothing is ever perfect. But man, people used to at least be civil to each other. And this is one of those things that leads into Civil War II. We can't be civil, and that's largely on the left. They are the ones that are causing most of the problems. They are the ones that are the enemies of civilization itself. Scrolling past to my lower third, I've forgotten what the percentage is, but if those idiots adopted the Green New Deal, and I know Biden says he won't, but it's actually up on his freaking website. But if they adopt the Green New Deal, I've forgotten what the percentage is, but I think it's 13% of the world population would probably die, because the Green New Deal would cut agricultural productivity in the United States 25, 50%. Because we feed so many people, that's 1 billion or 2 billion people dying of starvation, including Americans. They are the enemies of civilization itself at this point and cannot be allowed to take power. I hope very much that Trump is reelected, and I hope very much that the House is turned. I don't know that they'll get anything done, because even when the House and the Senate and the presidency are held by Republicans historically, they'll promise everything in the world, and then when they actually have the power, they don't do it. I don't know if anything can change, but what I do know is that the left cannot be allowed to take power. They will destroy civilization itself. Drop 2 says, good deeds help others, then hopefully they'll help others. Yep, exactly. Joe Biden said Antifa doesn't exist. It's only an idea. God, the number of times I've heard that. Social media, I hear it all the time. People on the left saying, no, they're not doing badly. They're just an idea. Anybody can be an Antifa. Just means anti-fascist. Well, guess what? Antifa is, in fact, a fascist organization. They operate. I strongly suggest that you go out and you read the science fiction book, The Moon is a Harsh Mistress by Robert A. Heinlein. It is damn near a instruction manual for revolt. And Antifa operates very similarly. In an actual revolution, what you try to do is you have a lot of cells, of very small people. And maybe one cell will be able to talk to one or two others, but they never know, only one person from each cell talks to the one person from so forth. And the person at the top is hearing information, but because you have these cells and because they're only talking to a few cells on the other side, then even if they're captured and tortured, they can't give up too much information. Antifa operate like that. They really do. They call them chapters, but it's clear from the one in Omaha. They just recently, within the last few days, Omaha, Nebraska is about 40-minute drive from me, and is a metro area of 1 million. And some Antifa beat the snot out of some guy recently, nearly killed him. Omaha, Nebraska, for Christ's sake. They're everywhere, and they have cells. They have revolutionary cells. It is not a question of you being anti-fascist, so therefore you are in Antifa. They are an organization, and they are causing a lot of problems right now, if not being the major cause of the problem. Interestingly enough, I had occasion to talk to a police officer here from Lincoln, Nebraska, for something totally different. But we got into a conversation about the riots that we have here and the amount of property damage that there's been, and how they're handling it, and how the police department handles things with that right now. And he told me that it surprised me, because I didn't think that this would happen, but they got agitators from way out of state that they arrested, a fair number of them. People have always been saying, oh, it's a small number of people who just move around and they're all funded by George Soros and all that. I never know how to evaluate what people say about George Soros. It's just difficult to impossible. But clearly there are some of them, and I think what happens is you get these cells, like in Omaha, in Lincoln, smallish groups of people that are talking to each other, and the word filters around and eventually gets to people who are paid agitators, and they come and show up. It's clearly what was happening in Kenosha, Wisconsin. I've forgotten what the percentage was. I think they arrested over 120 people who had come from Portland. What a shock. They saw an area of opportunity and they took it. So I think there's some of that going on. I think they actually are structured kind of like a revolutionary organization with individual cells, so that if you grab a certain cell, they can't really give away too much information. They can talk about what they've been doing, but they can't talk about the other cell. They can't talk about the people at the top, because they just don't know. It's intentionally when you do that, when you do have a revolution like that. Super 63 says, yeah, he laughed when Biden said Antifa doesn't exist. Yeah, I mean, I don't know whether he's just so senile or so stupid or so misinformed that he doesn't know about Antifa or what they do or that sort of thing. Or maybe he's just saying they don't exist because he wants to push it off as all of this violence being instigated by the right, which it wasn't. All this violence, every single one, no exceptions, has been instigated by the left. And they have been being cheered on for 4 years by elected officials. You know, if there was any justice in the world, you know, the House would kick these people out. You know, the same thing with the Senate. Maxine Waters, for God's sake, running around all the time, screaming about how bad Trump is, how he's going to get impeached, and then telling her constituents, you got to go out, you got to march, you got to get in people's faces. You know, if somebody comes into a restaurant who doesn't agree with you, you have to get in their face and force them out. And guess what? They've done that. And now they've escalated to Civil War II. And the Antifa being their cells, it looks a lot like a revolutionary group to me. It really does. Drop Truth says compartmentalization, Bill. Most military organizations work like that. Yeah, absolutely. Again, the best thing you can do, read Heinlein's book, Robert A. Heinlein's book, The Moon is a Harsh Mistress, because it details a revolution that occurs on the moon in the future. And it is damn near an instruction manual. Just damn near an instruction manual for an insurrection. Dalton says, I have personally known people involved in Antifa. Worst people I have ever met. Oh, why am I not shocked by that? Yeah, it's interesting. Somebody did a fact check on Biden in that debate. And it was, he lied at least 33 times in an hour and a half. And there was some fact-checking with Trump, and he lied some too. I expect a certain level of lying out of my politicians, you know, even if it's somebody I support. Yeah, they lie all the time, unfortunately. But Biden saying that Antifa is just an idea either indicates that he's out of contact with reality or he is courting them. I'd like to give him the benefit of the doubt and say that he's just going senile and he's out of contact with reality. But there's every possibility that he is, in fact, courting them. You know, he didn't want to call them out. You know, Trump did. Trump called out white supremacists and Proud Boys and all this stuff. He wouldn't call them out. Just, it's just an idea. It's not a real thing. Well, have you not been paying attention for the last, let me see if I've got it. There's a channel or two I watch. Yes, we are on day 187 of protests around the country, particularly in Portland. Has he been paying no attention? You know, I know they want to push this off on Trump, which is ridiculous, just ridiculous. Trump had nothing to do with all this violence. If anything, he has been behaving in a way that I would like to see a libertarian president behave. He hasn't done anything in terms of going in where people don't want him. He has, the 10th Amendment is clear, unless you have an actual insurrection. The state and the people are supposed to handle it. He's let the state and the people handle it. When they've asked for the help, he's given them the help, which is a constitutional thing to do. I don't think he can get away at this stage of the game with just weeding them all out. Maybe after he gets into his second term and he doesn't have to worry about, a third term, we may see some more movement on some of that. I don't know. But, it was the same thing with COVID. He didn't do any national lockdowns the way that Biden wants to do. He's said he'd do repeatedly. And you do not need to lock down where I live. You just don't. The virus is a non-issue. You do not have to do that. Drop 2 says, people ask how was the huge Manhattan Project kept a secret? Compartmentalization. Lieutenant General Leslie Richard Groves Jr. was in control. Yeah, well, anytime you do anything that is either, requires real secrecy, or if you're organized crime, you have compartmentalization. Nobody knows everything that's going on, so that even if you rat somebody out, if you're in the mafia, you can only rat out a certain number of people, and they can only rat out a certain number of people. So compartmentalization, absolutely. Yeah, if you're going to have a revolution, that's what you need. And the Antifa do. Near as I can tell, looking at it, that's what they have. Compartmentalized cells that communicate with one cell or another, and the word goes out. And it goes out very quickly because Twitter will let these guys use that platform in order to plan their nefarious activities. Twitter lets them do it. There was one Antifa group, I got a screen cap of it because I was so shocked. There's one Antifa group on the West Coast, I think, that was posing with lots of guns. Well, and they say from time to time that they're ready to use them. And I think if Trump wins, they will use them immediately. Civil War II may go into high gear. Although, of course, it's going to be whatever happens. It's the only way it won't be a contested election is one side or the other just wins so decisively that even if they counted all the mail-in ballots that came in after the election, it wouldn't frickin' matter. But who the hell knows whether something like that'll happen? Obviously, mail balloting rather is bad. I showed it before on the show. I live in Nebraska. This is an Iowa ballot. I could vote for president twice, once in Nebraska and once in Iowa if I want to. And I've forgotten, I think it's Super Cruise 63 who is in possession of 5 ballots, all from California. And that's just it's just barely scratches the surface. God. Again, another guy I love. It used to be that investigative journalists really did investigating work, and James O'Keefe is one of those guys. He's a traditional investigative journalist, and boy, did he get the goods on a completely illegal activity stuff going on with ballots that had to do with Representative Ilhan Omar, one of the socialist squad. If she is actually, behind that, which apparently is the case, and apparently it's an open secret in the Somali area that she actually represents, oh man, if she's left in office, that would be a travesty of justice. O'Keefe is very, very specific about it. He's got people on video who are incriminating themselves. And apparently this goes on all the time, and it's kind of an open secret among the Somalis. She's got to go. She's got to go. Not only is she an enemy of civilization itself, she really has to go. She's terrible. And if this stuff with the voting, voter fraud that's going on is true, the massive voter fraud that's going on is true, you have to ask yourself, where else is it happening? How many other states, how many other cities? Is it happening here in Lincoln, Nebraska? Could, for all I know. Mail-in voting is bad. Go to your polling place. Go to your polling place. Dropper 2 says Miller's Crossing is a good example. Let's see. In California, has had 5 mail-in ballots to him, sent to him so far. Yeah. Shadow Man. That's it. It's Shadow Man who has the 5. I tend to forget. As I say, introvert. I try to remember these things, but sometimes they slip out. And it's been a hell of a couple of weeks. I can't talk about it. It's personal stuff, but certainly didn't help any that I'm... Oh, man. See, what happened with our house was a large tree, a very large tree that I knew was dying or dead, finally fell over in a very high wind that we had in a storm. Crashed over a chain link fence, and we really didn't want to deal. I mean, we had somebody come out and get rid of the tree and carve off the trunk, but I really didn't want to deal with it in like August because in Nebraska, August is really super hot, at least 100 degrees, damn near every day, sometimes as high as 110. We have fairly high humidity where I live, so the humidity makes it terrible. So, today finally it got down to, about 55, and I'm thinking, all right, this is a good time. Went out there and I spent so much time whacking away and cutting and sawing so that we could get to the fence, and then taking the fence down, and then realizing that I ain't going to be able to fix this because the fence posts, not surprisingly, are set in concrete, and the fence posts are broken, so we're going to call somebody out. But I had a lot of I made multiple trips to the local landfill with all of this stuff, because you could put it out, but I was like, man, there's so much of it, screw it. I'll put the seat up in my my Jeep, and I'll just shove as much as I can in there. Made it in 2 trips. So that's something. One of the weird things is, when I was growing up here, Lincoln was about 150,000 people. It's, what was that, 300 and something, 319 in the county, more like 340 because some of the outlying suburbs are outside of Lancaster County. But the only thing, one of the few things that hasn't changed since when I lived here is, where's the town dump? So I dumped a lot of stuff. Excuse me. Back up here. Superguru63 says, I wish I had a way to use a barcode reader to see if the barcodes are different. Yeah, you can actually get a barcode if you have an Android side. It has barcode applications that don't just read this, QR codes. They will read regular barcodes. So you might be able to do it with that. I don't know. Drop Truth says, what Ilhan Omar has done by buying votes is effectively treason. It is certainly highly, highly illegal. And, they don't have it right now where you can say she's behind it. But the local police are investigating it. I assume that the federal government will be investigating it as well because she's a federal representative. If it is actually her behind any of this, jail is too good for her. Superguru63, you have 2. Oh, great. So now I know multiple people have multiple ballots. They both have your name on them and the same address. Yeah, Drop of Truth, how I scratched my left arm. I have scratches everywhere. I cannot do anything when I'm dealing with mechanical stuff. I actually have, I don't know if you can see it. Yeah, I can't, thank goodness. I have a cut in here on my on over one here. You can't see it. It's pretty much, it was a small cut, but I can't do anything with respect to doing that kind of outside work, mechanical work. Hell, back when computers were a little more difficult to deal with internally, I'd rip up my knuckles all the time. I got this from my father. My father also couldn't do any of this kind of work without ripping his knuckles to shreds and things like that. But yeah, the stuff that you see on my arm, that's all from running around with all of this stuff, all these tree junks that had to be hauled away. So yeah, that's how I got it. Speaking of which, as I mentioned early on when I started, my sciatic nerve got rather kind of hit with doing all of this work. That's the problems you have when you get to be an old fart like me. The body starts to wear thin in places, and my sciatic nerve is one of them. I think I'm going to cut it off here about half an hour early because I can tell that I need to be spending time. I found out when I was out of the family ranch land, and there's sort of a rocker recliner there, I discovered that does wonders for my lower back. And I can tell that my lower back and my sciatic nerve want to be sitting in my rocker recliner that I bought after I came back from there. So I think I will probably cut it off at 2.5 hours here. So that's all I have to say about that. I would love to keep this conversation going, so please leave your comments, questions, and nasty remarks I'll do my best to respond to you. Supercruise63 says, if I lived in Nebraska, I would trade mechanical labor for you computer labor. Well, I have no problem with that. I am in-home IT for my mother, and I do IT support for my next-door neighbor because he's got things like a snowblower. And that's the other thing. In January, it just dumps snow on us really bad. You can get a couple of feet. My father often joked that when he retired, he was going to find a place nice and temperate somewhere, but keep his house in Nebraska so that he could come back for 1 week in August, 1 week in January, so he'd remember what he left behind. So thank you very much. Bath with Epsom salts won't do so much for me, but anyway, thanks for watching. That is all the time that we have today for this episode of Tales from SYL Ranch, where everyone is entitled to my opinion. And I'm Bill Stone.
Ultimate power in this world has always been one simple thing: the control and manipulation of minds.